So what happens when the very system that's supposed to deliver justice is actually the source of the problem? Today we're going to dive into that timeless conflict, that clash between the ideal of perfect justice and the messy reality of human corruption. And we're going to use the story of ancient Israel as our guide.
Okay, so to really get what's going on here, you first have to understand the ideal. In the ancient Near East, the king wasn't just a ruler, he was the final word, the supreme court on all things justice. He was supposed to be God's man on the ground, making sure the innocent were protected and the guilty got what was coming to them. The whole legal system basically rested on his shoulders.
And that right there brings us to the core question that biblical writers just wrestled with constantly. If the person at the very top of the ladder is corrupt, how can anyone else possibly find justice?
To really see this problem play out, let's look at a guy who was supposed to be the poster child for justice for all of Israel's kings.
Wow, the contrast here is it's staggering. On one side, you've got King David, the ideal, right? A man after God's own heart. But then you look at the reality. The book of 2 Samuel tells this absolutely grim story of adultery with Bathsheba, a desperate cover-up, and then arranging the murder of her husband Uriah, one of his most loyal soldiers. The supreme judge had become a murderer. It's a chilling example of how unchecked power can corrupt even the best of them.
So you might be asking, how in the world do you confront a king who has absolute power? Well, the prophet Nathan did it with this brilliant legal move. He tells King David a story, a kind of hypothetical case, about a rich guy who steals a poor man's only beloved lamb. David, in his role as judge, just flies into a rage and declares the man deserves to die. And that's when Nathan springs the trap, with those 4 devastating words, "You are the man." He uses this incredible trick, what scholars call a juridical parable, to get David to sentence himself.
And get this, Nathan wasn't some lone wolf. This act of speaking truth to power was the first big response to this kind of systemic injustice. It basically created a new job description in society, the prophet as a divine prosecutor.
And you see this pattern pop up again and again. It wasn't just Nathan. We see Elijah going head-to-head with King Ahab for murdering a man just to steal his vineyard. You've got Amos calling out the entire wealthy class for trampling on the poor and taking bribes. Isaiah goes after princes who are robbing widows and orphans, and Micah condemns judges who twist justice for a quick buck. These prophets became heaven's attorneys, bringing charges against the most powerful people in the entire country.
And just listen to the kind of language they used. This is not some polite suggestion. This is a fierce, prosecutorial indictment from the prophet Amos. He's basically saying, I see you taking bribes and pushing the needy aside in court. And God, the ultimate judge, he sees it too. In those fancy houses you built with your corrupt wealth, yeah, you're going to lose them. The prophets were the voice for the voiceless.
Now, all this prophetic smack talk, it wasn't just moral outrage. It was actually part of a formal divine legal process, a concept that was absolutely central to how Israel understood its relationship with God.
So there's this concept called a rib, which basically means a covenant lawsuit. Think of it like this. The relationship between God and Israel, it's seen as a legal treaty. God is the powerful king, the suzerain, and he makes a treaty with his people, Israel, the vassal. The laws are the terms of the contract. So when the people, especially their leaders, break those terms, God, as the plaintiff, can literally take them to court.
And if you want a front row seat to one of these divine lawsuits, the book of Micah lays it all out. It's like watching an episode of a courtroom drama, but, biblical.
So God kicks off the case. But listen to his tone. It's fascinating. He doesn't start with a big list of accusations. He starts with this heartbroken, personal appeal. He reminds them of their history together, how he rescued them from slavery. He's essentially saying, my entire track record with you is one of faithfulness and justice. If you have evidence that says otherwise, present it. Testify against me.
Now the people's defense? It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, but also deeply cynical. They use this escalating hyperbole, like, what do you want from us? Thousands of rams, rivers of oil, and then comes the knockout punch. Should I give my firstborn son? What they're doing is so clever. They're pointing to a law in the book of Exodus that says the firstborn of your sons you will give to me, and basically accusing God of having impossible, contradictory, and even barbaric standards. They're arguing, we can't win. Your laws are unjust.
But then comes the verdict. And it just slices right through their whole argument. The final ruling isn't about impossible sacrifices. It's all about ethical action. The prophet Micah declares that what God has always wanted is clear and good, to do justice, to love kindness, and to live faithfully. This is a total game changer. It reframes what it means to be religious. It's not about big, fancy rituals to please God. It's about how you live your life.
Okay, so holding individuals accountable, even the king, that's one way to go. But what if prosecuting even the most powerful people just isn't enough to fix a system that's broken to its core? Some ancient writers realized you had to go further. You had to change the system itself.
And the idea they came up with, it's mind-blowing for its time. The norm everywhere in the ancient world was that the king was the law. His word was final. But the book of Deuteronomy comes along and proposes something revolutionary. The king is not above the law, he is subject to it. And then it does the unthinkable. It strips the king of any judicial role whatsoever. That power, the very thing that defined being a king, is taken from the top and given to local judges. I mean, think about it. This is basically an ancient blueprint for the separation of powers.
So you might be wondering, what is the king's job then, if he can't be a judge? Well, according to Deuteronomy, his main job isn't to judge other people, but to constantly study the law himself. He has to write out his own personal copy and read it every single day. The whole point is to keep him humble, to stop him from thinking he's better than everybody else, and to make sure he's the #1 follower of the law, not its source. It completely redefines leadership as service, not domination.
So let's kind of pull all this together. What's the big takeaway? Well, we've seen that when ancient Israel was up against some really deep-seated corruption, they didn't just have one solution. They developed this whole toolbox for fighting back and pursuing justice.
Yeah, their response wasn't just one simple thing. You had the raw courage of the prophets standing up to power. You had this core belief that everyone, even kings, has to answer to a higher divine court. You had the desperate cries of ordinary people just begging for rescue. And you even had these radical attempts at systemic legal reform, rewriting the laws themselves to limit and spread out power. It was a dynamic, ongoing struggle to close that gap between the ideal of perfect justice and our flawed human reality.
And all this leaves us with a question that honestly is just as relevant today as it was 3,000 years ago. When we see injustice in our world, is our first instinct to just find a single bad actor, a single bad apple to punish? Or do we, like those ancient reformers, have the courage to look deeper and ask the harder question? Is the very structure of power, the system itself, the thing that needs to be changed?